live. So good morning, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And we are particularly excited today as we are kicking off our first week of February, which is an entire month dedicated to incredible and amazing women in science from around the globe. We kick out all the men. We have over 45 sessions with incredible women. So we really thank you guys for joining us today. We hope that all the classes can join us for the rest of the month as well. So we are hoping for 2 more classes to be joining us in a minute, but right now we've got 2 classes joining us from across North America. So I'm going to give them a chance to say hi. We've got Mr. Kim's grade 9 through 11s in Owen Sound, Ontario. Hi, guys. Hi. Hey, welcome in. And we've got Miss Aldrich's grade 8 is in Morris, Illinois. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Awesome. All right. Of course, the reason you guys are all here today is for our speaker. So we are joined live by Stephanie Schuttler. Sorry, she is a wildlife biologist. She is working on citizen science projects to bring science into the classroom to make sure that you guys can understand ever more about mammals and cool biology. She's worked with forest elephants. And I love this part of her bio at the very end when she sent it in to us. She's the daughter of a jeweler, so she has an affinity for sparkles and loves makeup and fashion. Her goal is to show people you can be a serious scientist but still have fun. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, Stephanie, and take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. I forgot I put that in my part of the bio, so it made me laugh. But it's true though. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my screen now, and you should see my PowerPoint. Is that true?
Yep, we're all good.
Okay.
Bring it up for the full screen. There you go.
Okay, great. So I am coming to mine. I just got to move this away. Okay, so I am coming to you from the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, and this is where I work. And I'm going to give you a little bit of introduction about myself. So I never thought I would be a scientist, ever, ever, ever. How I became a scientist, and some of the research that I work on. So elephants, and then now what I am doing with citizen science and camera traps. So the reason why I never thought I could be a scientist, or the reason why I actually like to add that part on the end of my bio about jewelry and sparkles and stuff is because this is usually what people think of when they think of scientists. And actually people rarely think even of women. If you ask kids to draw scientists, they will draw usually men, usually older white men, sometimes with crazy hair like Albert Einstein, and usually they're in a lab with things like test tubes. But when I was growing up, this is the scientist I was familiar with. So it's really appropriate that we're doing it now in February where it's all women. And she is actually probably one of the most, if not the most famous living scientists in the world. And this is Jane Goodall. And she studied chimpanzees in the wild. And she did some pretty revolutionary things for a scientist, period, let alone a woman scientist. She moved to the jungles of Tanzania and lived amongst the chimpanzees. And this is all I knew really about scientists. And I grew up in a family where we went camping, and then at night we would stay in hotels. So I definitely did not think I could be a scientist, even though I thought what Jane Goodall did with her research was super cool. So ironically, I did end up going to Africa many times, and I have had some experiences getting really close to wildlife and getting to study them and do some pretty cool things. So how did I make this journey all the way from never thinking I could become a scientist? I didn't even know there were careers in science, to tell you the truth, when I was growing up, to becoming a wildlife biologist. So for me, I had always loved animals. So here I am with cheetahs at the American Museum of Natural History. They're not alive, of course. And holding a frog. I used to catch frogs and snakes when I was younger to see them up close. We would always let them go though. So I always loved animals. And for me, how I determined I could become a wildlife biologist was actually really randomly. When I was in college, I was actually studying theater, and I did biology as a backup career because I thought I could always become a medical doctor if theater didn't work out, because theater's kind of risky. And my brother suggested that I should do a study abroad program. And that is where you get to spend a semester and take courses in another country. And I went to the study abroad office. I found all these cool brochures, but the ones on theater, they seemed amazing. But the one in Africa seemed really, really cool. And this one was in Kenya, and it was a program in wildlife management. Because I was already a biology student, it was not abnormal for me to do this program. I did it just for fun. I just thought, like, when can I ever go to Africa again? My family never traveled internationally, and I just thought it would be something that I would never do in my life. So I did this, and it turns out that by going all the way to Kenya, I learned that there are careers in wildlife biology all around the world, including here in the United States. And from there on, I changed my career path. So luckily I was still biology, so I didn't have to change that much. I just finished my major. And then from there on out, I had a couple of years where I worked in different places, doing different internships. And then I started my PhD in 2006. And I was inspired for my PhD research by these guys who I saw in Kenya millions of times. So these are African savanna elephants. And elephants, they're just, super cool animals. Really, they don't look like any other animal. And animals that are actually most closely related to them don't look like elephants. They're manatees and these animals called hyraxes. But the really cool thing about elephants is that they're super smart. They're amongst the smartest animals on the planet. And they have these really cool social networks. So all of the adult females and their calves stay together in these tight-knit family groups. And they're all related. And then oops, sorry, I thought I had one more slide now. And then over time and space, they get into these really big, larger herds, and they're still all related to each other. So this is kind of like at Thanksgiving, if you were to get together with your relatives over a big family dinner. And these groups are really important for their survival. So elephants are being really heavily poached right now, and they're poached for their tusks. So a lot of times the poachers will go after the elephants with the biggest tusks, and this is usually the oldest elephant in the group, and these elephants have the most knowledge. And the research on elephants shows that when these older elephants, these matriarch grandmother elephants, are poached, then the group loses a lot of their survival skills. So they might not remember like important watering hole sources to go to in times of drought, or if a lion comes across, they might not have the right behavior to protect their young. So elephants with these older matriarchs intact are really important for the whole entire group's survival. And so this has been really well studied in Kenya, and particularly one population of elephants. But there's a whole another species of elephant that has really never been studied before. So this is the African forest elephant. And the reason why is because they are really difficult to see in the forest. And so these guys live in Africa, but they're a completely different species. But here you can see one just hidden almost completely by vegetation. And there are a couple of areas where you can see the forest elephants, but when you see them, it's usually just an adult female and her calf. So we wouldn't really call this an elephant group because the calves, they stay with their adult moms until they grow up. So what I want to know is the network of forest elephants really different from savanna elephants like those in Kenya? Or maybe if you look in the back, there's some taller vegetation. Maybe these elephants are actually hanging out in groups, but it's just hard to see them, and they're really being obscured by the forest vegetation. So I did my PhD research on this, And I would drive around this park in Gabon, which is mostly forest, but it does have some savanna habitats. And I would look for elephants. And when I saw an elephant, I would take note of who they are by their ear patterns and tusk patterns. And I would make these groups from them. So here's 3 elephants. And if I saw them together, I would connect them. And then if we saw the elephants again, we would create new connections if there were different members added to it. And then over time, if these elephants were a lot like the savanna elephants, we would expect their connections to become bigger and bigger and bigger, just like the savanna elephants. But what I found is that, so each circle here is represented by an elephant. The elephants, they did have larger groups than what we were seeing in the field. So there's this big one in the middle that has 22 female elephants. But what you'll see is there's still a lot of solitary elephants as well. And if you compare this to the savanna elephants, they actually interact with almost every elephant in the population. So you can see there's really some clear differences. So forest elephants do seem to have smaller groups, and it's probably because they eat fruits. So if you look in this elephant's trunk, there's a tiny fruit in there. And these fruits, they're about the size of a grape. So you can imagine if you were to eat these fruits all day long, it would take a long time to make you full, especially if you were an elephant. So what we think is going on is that it's just too hard for the elephants to go to these trees in these big groups, because then the trees become quickly depleted of food. And savanna elephants, they, during the wet season, have plenty of food available, and this is when they get to be in the largest groups. So we think this is the main reason why the forest elephants and the savanna elephants are different in their social structures. So now I'm going to switch gears, and I am going to talk about what I do now here at the museum. And I still study animals in forested environments. I study multiple environments, but most are in the forest. And just like the forest elephants, these animals are difficult to see. So we use these, which are called camera traps, and they're triggered by heat and motion. And we actually work with people all over the world. So here you see 2 kids in the photos. They set up these camera traps. Just put it on a tree about knee height, and then you leave it out in the woods for 3 weeks, and they collect photos of animals. So normally when you go to the forest, you might see something like this, and this is actually one of our volunteers' experience. He would hike in this forest every weekend, and he said there were no mammals there, maybe squirrels and rabbits. But on his very first camera trap deployment, he got this beautiful coyote picture. So the animals are there. You just don't see them. They probably see you though. Or they might come out at night too. That's another big one. And I actually work with kids, and we have another country added to this since I made the study in Chile. So I work with teachers in classrooms all over the world, and they set up their camera traps right on school grounds. And when we first started this project, we were super worried that we were going to only find like maybe stray cats and dogs and squirrels and stuff, but we were really blown away by the results. So remember, these animal pictures are all from school grounds, and we photographed 83 native species all around the world, including 12 that were on the IUCN's threatened or endangered list. So I think we had 5 endangered species. And yeah, we were just blown away by all of the cool animal diversity that we got. A cool thing here in North Carolina, and I did this with several other parks too, is I compared the school camera traps to those of a nearby state park. So the schools are in green and the orange is the state park. And the school camera traps had higher detection rates. So this means on average, they had more photos of that animal species per day than the state park, with the exception of deer right here in the beginning. And this is incredibly cool for foxes and coyotes because carnivores are usually more sensitive to human beings. So you don't tend to see them in areas where more people live. And then I just want to end with my favorite photo sequence. Now you're probably thinking, why am I showing you a picture of cows and people? But this picture takes place in India, and these kids set up their camera traps on this road. And even though it's a dirt road, it still gets a lot of traffic. And then at night, we got this amazing picture of a tiger. So this is one of our endangered species. And we actually got tigers, I think it was 12 times total. And you can tell the tigers apart by their stripes. So if we had good enough photos, we could identify individuals. And I think we had 6 individuals at least. So it's not just the same tiger coming up over and over again. Yeah, this was really cool that this was just set up by school kids. So the photographs that we are getting are being stored in a Smithsonian repository forever. So kids are contributing quite literally to real science that scientists from hundreds of years from now will use to look at the distribution of animals. And then of course, us, the scientists, we're using them right now in our understanding of the planet Earth. And so with that, that's the end of my presentation. And I am very happy to answer any questions that you have about elephants, mammals around the world, citizen science, or anything.
Well, how cool is that, Darby? That's amazing. That was awesome. All right. So before we dive into questions, just a quick note. We had our 3rd class join us, so Miss Huxley's class. Grade 5s in Brampton joined us. And then we've got a couple groups watching on YouTube Live as well. So if you guys want to type in your questions in the chat bar, don't be shy. Please do. And I'll pass along questions to Stephanie directly. But let's start. I know Mr. Kim's class is switching over soon. So I'll start with Mr. Kim's group. If you guys have a question and want to kick us off, go for it.
So why would there be increased school detection over parks, you think?
Yeah.
That is a really good question. So we actually validated that because around the same time we were doing a study looking at, we used 2 cities, so DC and Raleigh, North Carolina, and we looked at mammals in wild areas, rural areas, exurban areas, and suburban areas. In DC, we had a couple of urban areas, but not that many. And what we found is that the diversity of mammals didn't change across these different gradients. And in the suburban areas, there is actually a higher abundance. So there's a couple of things. In the eastern United States, a lot of the more sensitive species to development, like coyotes and cougars, have been completely extirpated. So they, or it's not, did I say coyotes? I meant to say wolves. Wolves and cougars have been completely extirpated. So they're no longer in these areas. And the rest of the mammals, that at least the mammals that we get on camera traps, are more adapted to humans. But it probably just also has to do with this amount of space that they have. So in the suburban areas, they're just like maximizing their space more. They have these little green spaces, and because there's fewer areas, they're just occupying it more. That's what we think is going on. Yeah. But it's important to note that this trend is not true for all animals. So bats we can't capture on camera traps, so they might be different. Definitely amphibians and birds might be different. But it's at least exciting for mammals. And our study showed that as long as we have these small green areas, these mammals can persist.
Fantastic. Great answer. I want to stress too, sorry, you had mentioned at the beginning, you're at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, and so we've done like 10 presentations with them. They're really, really fantastic content, so I just want to highlight to our classes, if you guys want to check out some really great stuff on our YouTube channel. They're an amazing education team there. All right, Mr. Kim, again, I know you guys are going, and I want to see if we have a student. Do you guys have another question before we go to the other class?
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, no problem. Have a nice rest of your day. All right, let's go to Miss Aldridge's group. Come on up, guys.
Go ahead.
You said that the reason that the elephants were like more spread out in the jungle area was because that they eat fruit. And I was wondering what the other like elephants in the
Savannah.
savannah eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the savanna elephants, they eat more browse and grass. So they eat leaves, they eat a lot of grasses, they'll eat things like barks and even tree branches. And the forest elephants, they'll eat all that stuff too, but they prefer fruits a lot more. And there's a lot of fruits in the forest. In the park that I worked in, there's over 200 species that they eat.
Wow, very cool. Thanks so much. Good question, guys. All right, Ms. Huxley's class, come on up, and then we're gonna just do second and third rounds. We're whipping through these. This is great.
We don't have much.
Nope, nothing right now. That's okay. All good. I'll come back in a second. How about Ms. Aldridge's class again?
I just thought it was so interesting about kind of like the trail cams near the schools compared to, we live in a smaller town, but the school is located within the city limits. So I would just be amazed at what kind, what we would even see on something that would be outside of our school. I would think that it'd be like cats, dogs, maybe some coyotes. I'm not sure.
I think you'd be surprised by what you get. And even with the school photos in North Carolina, a lot of teachers think that you have to have a really rural location. That's not true at all. In fact, most of our schools are suburban. So the animals that we have had on North Carolina schools, well, they're all in that photo. So we had a black bear at a school once. We had definitely coyotes, even in the really suburban schools, we get coyotes. So there's this one school that is literally across the street from an outdoor mall, and they even have coyotes. So coyotes, they're incredibly adaptable. In downtown Chicago, there are coyotes that live there, whole packs of coyotes, like literally downtown in the city. So these animals have really adapted. Raccoons, opossums, squirrels, rabbits, deer. Those are the major ones that we get. The only animals here in North Carolina that we can capture on camera trap that are sensitive to development are bobcats. Those we really only find in the more rural areas.
Now, just a quick follow-up. You had said that you have these connections with other schools around the world. Are there plans to do more with other schools across the U.S., Canada, and internationally, or what's happening with that? Which is exciting. Yeah,
so we are open to having more schools involved. It just depends on funding. That's always the issue. So we had a grant to work with schools in Mexico and India. And those schools have continued on their program. And then when I did an expedition in Kenya, I gave them some camera traps. So they're continuing on as well. In India, they actually applied for a grant to involve 20 more schools. So I've just finished reviewing all of those photos, and we're working on data analysis right now. And that is actually really exciting data, because in India, they have a huge population growth. They're the second most populated planet on Earth, or country on Earth, and but they still have a lot of wildlife, a lot of those species that haven't quite rebounded and developed a more a close relationship with humans. So, and there's a lot of variation with the animals across those schools too. So like at one school, we found endangered species like tigers and dholes, which are a kind of wild dog. We found pangolins, which are really endangered right now. Like there's not even good research on them, and they're declining so fast. But yeah, every school has wildlife at it, whether it's mongoose or gaurs are actually in decline. We got those at a lot of schools as well. And then in Chile too, they received funding to get camera traps. So we finished up a project there as well. So if you want to get a camera trap and be involved, we'd be happy to have your school be a part of it.
Fantastic. And we'll pass along a link to those resources and everything that you're doing after the fact. We got a question from a group watching online in Montreal, and they wanted to ask, where were the most animal sightings of the photo traps? You highlighted school versus rural area. Is there anywhere specific that you guys put them that really had a lot of sightings? Or
do you mean, do they mean like what types of habitat, or?
Let me ask them and find out. It's all on
Okay.
YouTube, so they're typing it in. So I'll get back to that in a second.
I can answer more generally in the meantime. So we do ask people to put the camera traps out randomly because we don't want to bias the data. Because certain types of animals will use trails. A lot of people want to put them on trails, and like carnivores like to use trails. So if there's a lot of carnivores using trails, and maybe herbivores won't use the trails as much. I do tend to think the trails tend to get more animals than other spots though. Because if you're an animal, just think about it. Like, would you rather go through an open area or would you rather go through a thick, dense area?
Yeah.
Did they specify? Does it specify?
Not yet, but I'll get back
Okay.
if they do. Speaking of trails, you were talking about forest elephants, and obviously they, leave this fantastic, trail network through the forest that they live in. When you were there, did you get to work on any other animals? Or do you have plans to go back to Africa? I love when people get a chance to share from such a neat place.
I don't have any plans to go back. I would love to. I mean, we still have our work in Kenya, but yeah, they have these huge network of trails. We would always use elephant trails. No, I would love to go back there because so little is known about forest elephants. When I decided my topic for my PhD, I couldn't believe how little there was known about forest elephants, because elephants as a whole, are the biggest land animals. So you think, oh, okay, everyone's got to know stuff about elephants, but forest elephants, a lot of the places where they live are really hard to access. And you can't really drive through easily. And then to study elephants, you have to be able to cover a large range. So you can't really follow and watch them because, they move fast and they go long ranges. So it's really, really hard to study them.
Thanks for that. That's great. The quick clarification was, which school? Was there a specific school that you worked with that had the most things? I mean, India looked pretty spectacular, but.
So yeah, I think it was the one school. It was either the school in Kenya or a school in India had the most species. Yeah, and that's just because they have more large animal species in those countries too. But yeah, the one school in India got tigers many times. Here in North Carolina, I think it was actually a suburban school in Asheville that had the most species.
Yeah.
Or it was a more rural school because they did get a bobcat. But the Asheville school, yeah, they had black bears.
And if they ever get a tiger on the Asheville camera, we have to report that one immediately.
We did get, a couple of years ago, we got, this wasn't on camera trap, but there was a capybara on the road that was roadkill, and capybaras live in South America. So obviously an escaped captive.
We had 2 capybaras get loose in a Toronto downtown park for like a month and a half, and like no one could find these pig-sized rodents. It was very fun. All right, I want to go back to our class. So Miss Aldridge's class, if you guys have a question, you just type one in, but let's take it in person. Better that way.
What do you do when you're not studying in the field?
That's actually a really, really good question, because I show all these amazing animal photos and a lot of people think that I'm in the field all the time. But to tell you the truth, I'm really not. And especially with camera traps. And since we work with citizen scientists, we ask them to set up the cameras. So I might go to India once and teach them how to set up the cameras. But then from there on out, they're setting the cameras and they're using our software to upload the photos. And we work with them to analyze the data. So actually, a lot of my work is remote. And a lot of science, so if you're interested in becoming a scientist, a lot of science is really data analysis. And so I spend my time analyzing data and then writing up the results for other scientists to read. And I just really want to emphasize analyzing data because now technology has changed the field so much. So, I mean, really, we've only had camera traps functionally since I would say the 90s. They existed in the 50s, but they made them with these big magnesium cakes that would explode. So you get these flashes of pictures of animals running away from them. So they've really only functionally worked since we've had digital cameras. So before you used to have to take film, which would be limited to 32 photos. So you might have one squirrel come on your camera trap and take up all the photos. So now if you leave a camera trap out, you might get 10,000 photos. And in a place like Kenya, where there's animals always moving around, you can easily get tens of thousands of photos. So the problem now is we have so much data And how do we analyze that? So we need to come up with really sophisticated ways, statistics and data analysis to figure out how to analyze the data.
Yeah, very cool. I'm really glad we get that question. All right, Mr. Kim, I know you guys had a whole other class come in. I am going to come to you guys in a second if you happen to have any questions, having seen half the Q&A now. But first, I'm going to go to Ms. Huxley's group. If you guys have another one or have a first one.
Hi, Jess. We had a very interesting start with our Zoom. It was, I don't know, kind of on YouTube. So we do have a question, though.
You do?
Yep, Dia's coming here.
In what kind of habitat do the elephants live in?
So there are 3 species of elephants. There's the African savanna elephants, which I talked about first. And those guys tend to live in more savanna-like habitat. Or if they live in forests, they're more like drier forests. The African forest elephants, those guys pretty much almost exclusively live in forests. And these are rainforests of Central Africa. And even though I had some savanna habitat in the park where I studied, it was very, very small compared to the forest. And then there's another species of elephant that I didn't talk about, which is the Asian or Indian elephant. And those guys, they can live in both types of habitat, but they tend to live more in forests like the African forest elephants do. And they eat a lot of fruits too.
Fantastic. All right, I'm going to take 2 more questions unless we get another one on YouTube. So I'm going to check in with Mr. Kim's class. Hi, guys. I don't know if you have any questions. I know you guys came in halfway through. If you don't, that's totally fine, but I was just curious if you did.
Oh, no, you can just say from here. Yeah.
Oh, how much does a full-grown elephant weigh?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so bad with numbers.
No pressure.
Oh my gosh, I don't remember off the top of my head, honestly. I'm really bad at numbers.
Let me find out. Here we
Yeah,
go.
I just have to Google.
We're going to do it. We're going to use the power of Google. So yeah, elephant, I mean, the largest land animal in the world.
Yeah.
So elephants can weigh up to 14,000 pounds. A full-grown bull male African elephant.
Yeah.
14,000
And-
pounds, 7 tons.
And so the largest elephants will be the African savanna male elephants. The smallest elephants are the African forest elephants. And the females will always be smaller than the males of both species. But yeah, I'm bad at numbers.
Great. That's okay. We like superlatives. Superlative questions are the best. What's the biggest? What's the smallest?
Yeah, I should have looked that up before.
Yeah. What was the fastest you've ever seen an animal run by a camera trap? All right. You know what? We're going to wrap up with a question from Ms. Aldrich's class. If you guys have one to end us off, go for it. Come on up, guys.
What was the most interesting species of animals that you studied?
So, I mean, I definitely say the forest elephants, but I feel like you guys have heard that a lot. I'll tell you, yeah, I mean, I love the forest elephants because, or actually, I'll say elephants in general because a cool thing about elephants that people don't realize, and that is not even well explained by science, is that savanna elephants, we don't know if this happens in other elephants, but we can presume that it does. But savanna elephants, when they come across the bones of other elephants, they will stop and investigate them. And they've done studies with this with different skulls of animals, so rhino skulls and buffalo skulls and elephant skulls, and elephant's ivory and pieces of wood, and the elephants will always spend more time with the bones. And scientists suspect that it's almost like they're remembering. And there's this one study that they happened to find an elephant dying, a female dying in the field. And they, as part of this study, they had elephants in the whole population collared. They had different groups collared. So they had these tracking devices on them and they could see where they went. And as this elephant was dying, the other elephants in her group tried to pick her up and tried to help her get to her feet. And unfortunately, she did pass away. But the really interesting thing was that elephants in the area went completely out of their way to come visit this elephant who had just passed away. And they weren't related to the elephant either. So it's not like, they weren't related to her. So in terms of science, it's really hard to explain why they would do that, why they would travel so far out of their way to do that. And I think that's one of the really cool things about elephants and why they're so interesting is because they tend to have behaviors like humans. So we help out people who are not related to us. The reason why animals usually help out only animals that are related to them is because they share genes with them. So if you were to help someone who's genetically similar to you, it's the same thing as like passing on your genes. So for you to help out someone who's not related to you, it's not really well explained by science. So that's why I think elephants are particularly cool.
Very cool. What a great answer and what a great question to wrap us up. Stephanie, before we go, actually, I wanted to ask for classes that want to learn more about you, the work you do, eMammal, etc. Where can we point them to go in and find out more?
Sure. So I love blogging and I love social media, and I'm Fancy Scientist on everything. So you can go to if you go to fancyscientist.com, that will take you to all my social icons and you can follow me. And if you have other questions, feel free to send me a tweet or an Instagram DM and I will definitely answer them.
Amazing. All right. And I'll pass along both those and eMammal's website, North Carolina Museum of Natural Science, all that stuff to classes when we're done. And so what we do at the end of every session, Stephanie, I'm going to demute every class's microphone. And so boys and girls, if you guys could join me in saying a huge thank you. You are all demuted, Miss Aldrich, Mr. Kim, and Miss Huxley's class. Go for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome, guys. All right. You got 2 classes for the price of 1 with Mr. Kim's group too. Awesome. All right. To all our classes, thanks so much for joining in. Stephanie, that was fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone.